Taiwan, I'm Reece with news from here in Taiwan and around the world. Taiwan President Lai Ching-te is on his first diplomatic visit to the Marshall Islands, where he's pledging to help the nation buy new aircraft to patrol its waters. Maritime security is just one area where Lai is hoping to work with the country as he looks to bolster ties in the Pacific. Rick Glowett reports from the Marshall Islands.
This is the Parliament of the Marshall Islands, an island nation of just 40,000 people right in the middle of the Pacific, and lawmakers are gathering here to welcome Taiwan's President Lai Ching-te. Why is he here? Well, the Marshall Islands is one of just 12 countries around the world that recognizes Taiwan diplomatically. And Lai's leading a delegation to boost cooperation on issues including maritime security, healthcare, and adapting to climate change.
今天我来到马绍尔群岛，更深深感受到我们两国共享着广阔的太平洋、丰富的南岛文化，更共同怀抱自由民主的价值，并且在各领域密切交流，创造丰富的合作成果。
After visiting the US state of Hawaii, Lai travelled here to the Marshall Islands and will later visit diplomatic ally Tuvalu before transiting in Guam and then visiting Palau and back to Taiwan. China, which claims sovereignty over Taiwan, pressures countries not to officially engage diplomatically with Taiwan and shuts it out of global bodies like the United Nations. Formal diplomatic allies like the Marshall Islands are an important asset for isolated Taiwan, speaking out for it on the world stage. China has been using carrot and stick measures to encourage Pacific nations to switch allegiances to Beijing. Since 2019, Taiwan's allies here have dropped from 6 to 3. This may be a small, remote country, but the Marshall Islands is strategically important and a diplomatic asset for Taiwan. Lai's mission here will be to make good on commitments and reassure the people here that Taiwan is a reliable international partner. John Su and Rick Glowett in Majuro, Marshall Islands for TaiwanPlus.
Taiwan will soon receive 38 US-made tanks, the first batch in a more than $1.2 billion deal Taiwan made with the US back in 2019. But as Cadence Quaranta reports, the Defense Ministry here in Taipei is staying quiet about their delivery.
The first batch of tanks Taiwan's army has acquired from abroad in 30 years have reportedly arrived on Taiwan's shores. But the Defense Ministry is staying tight-lipped, this morning only confirming that the first batch of tanks would arrive by the end of this year.
抵岸之前，它的整体作业程序是列为机密的，所以我们不会对外去做说。
In 2019, the military bought American M1 Abrams tanks, one of the most advanced battle tanks in the world. They were supposed to be delivered by 2022, but were delayed. The Defense Ministry now says 38 tanks will be arriving within the next few weeks. The ministry says 42 more tanks will arrive next year, and 28 will arrive in 2026. Taiwan bought 108 in total, spending about $1.24 billion US. The whole contract is supposed to be finalized by 2027. Local media is reporting that the tanks will be positioned around the north of Taiwan and will be used to bolster the country's ground forces. Howard Zhang, Adil Brar, and Cadence Quaranta for TaiwanPlus.
A disgruntled bed and breakfast owner who fired a shotgun at the Digital Affairs Ministry has been sentenced to 4 years and 10 months in prison. The man from Nantou County walked into the ministry's headquarters in Taipei in March and fired 2 shots into the lobby. He then tried to reach the second floor but was stopped by staff. The man was lashing out at government policies restricting Chinese tourism. No one was hurt in the attack. China is warning Lithuania of countermeasures after the expulsion of 3 Chinese diplomats. Lithuania has not given a full explanation, but its ties with China are tense. China has been angry with Lithuania since 2021 for allowing Taiwan to set up a de facto embassy in the country, even using the word Taiwan in its official name. Relations worsened after a Chinese ship was suspected of cutting an undersea cable linking Lithuania and Sweden. Despite its warning, China also says it hopes relations with Lithuania will improve.
中方希望立陶宛新政府以实际行动恪守两国建交公报中所作政治承诺，坚持一个中国原则，推动双边关系重回正轨。
Any improvement could take time as Lithuania, Sweden and Finland begin an EU-backed probe into the cutting of the undersea cable. The United Nations top court has started landmark hearings on the legal obligations of countries to prevent climate change and the consequences for them if they fail. The International Court of Justice will hear from 99 countries and more than a dozen intergovernmental organizations over 2 weeks. Rosie Greninger reports.
Climate protests outside the United Nations top court in The Hague as hearings begin, aiming to clarify the obligations of countries to fight global warming. Demonstrators here are pushing for concrete action as international climate summits, including the UN-backed Conference of Parties, or COP, fail to secure meaningful change.
So we're hoping that this can really be a push forward, a step changer for climate negotiations, so that they say that states have legal obligations that have to align with human rights.
Over 2 weeks, the International Court of Justice will hear evidence from almost 100 countries and more than a dozen intergovernmental organisations. The judge is tasked with answering 2 key questions. What should countries and organisations be legally obligated to do to fight climate change? And what are the legal consequences to repair damage already caused? Some environmental experts argue that the actions of major greenhouse gas emitters have breached international law and they should face repercussions.
So our hopeful expectation is that the court will recognise this and articulate the legal consequences of these violations. And legal consequences of violations of international law are always twofold. The wrongful conduct, the breaching conduct must cease, it must be put to an end. And secondly, reparations must be made.
The case was spearheaded by a group of Pacific Island nations who are fighting for their very survival in the face of climate change. These nations, including Vanuatu, who initiated the effort to get a legal opinion, bear the brunt of rising sea levels and increasingly severe natural disasters. They're calling for the world's biggest polluters to be held accountable for their role in global warming and to help vulnerable nations combat the devastating impact.
The outcome of these proceedings will reverberate across generations, determining the fate of nations like mine and the future of our planet.
Although the result will not be legally binding, it will provide a concrete framework for international law. And with a record lineup of participating countries, the outcome could give extra weight to climate lawsuits across the globe, leaving the world's biggest polluters vulnerable to liability. Ryan Wu and Rosie Greninger for TaiwanPlus.
Vietnam's courts have upheld the death sentence of property tycoon Chong My Lan. Lan was appealing a sentence handed down in April. She's guilty of embezzling $12 billion and misappropriating $27 billion from a major bank. Under Vietnamese law, her sentence could have been commuted to life imprisonment if she repaid 75% of the funds she embezzled. She appealed the decision, reportedly asking for a more lenient and humane approach. At least 56 people are dead after a crowd crush at a football stadium in Guinea. The incident took place during a football match when fans of the visiting team stormed the pitch, protesting a red card decision. Security forces released tear gas to control the situation, causing thousands of spectators to flee through the narrow stadium gates. Children were among the dozens killed. The country's Prime Minister Ba Wu-ri expressed condolences to the victims and is promising medical and psychological help to the many injured. More rain is expected in northern Malaysia and southern Thailand as residents return to submerged homes after the worst floods in decades inundated the region.
Bayangkanlah masa kejadian tu, malam Sabtu tu dia potong api. Air pun tak ada. Jadi kita ibarat duduk macam tengah laut lah. Semua air. Mana bunyi deruan air yang terjah tu. Jadi sunyi lah.
At least 25 people died in Thailand and 6 in Malaysia in floods over the weekend. Tens of thousands have been displaced along the two countries' border. In Malaysia, over 38,000 hectares of rice fields have been affected. Though water levels have receded, the northeast monsoon is expected to bring a second wave of floods to the region later this week. Climate change is hitting the Panama Canal, with long dry spells making it harder to operate. But as John Van Trieste reports, not all are on board with the plan to deal with this problem.
For 110 years, the Panama Canal has been the shortcut between the Pacific and Atlantic Oceans, carrying 2.5% of global seaborne trade and letting thousands of ships per year go where they're going much faster. But climate change is putting this engineering marvel, so crucial to global trade, under strain. The dry season is growing longer in this part of the world. Droughts are making it harder to keep the canal running. And scientists predict the water shortage will only get worse, leaving the canal with a problem.
El Canal de Panamá es un canal que funciona con agua dulce y eso impone una desventaja relativa con relación a todos los otros sistemas de navegación marítima del mundo.
The canal's administration has a plan, but it will be costly in more ways than one. Rural Tres Hermanas in western Panama is a world away from the bustling canal locks. But its fate, and that of the hamlets around it, may end up tightly linked to the canals. The 2 schools, the church, the clinic, and all the farmland here may be underwater in 6 years' time, as plans to build a massive $1.6 billion reservoir by around 2030 gain momentum. 1.25 billion cubic meters of fresh water would collect here, letting as many as 15 more vessels transit the canal per year. But the over 2,000 farmers living here, the exact number isn't yet worked out, will need to leave.
Sí, hay una especie de inicio, pero claro, la parte más complicada, digamos, es el proceso de reasentamiento de las personas. Y eso son conversaciones que se tienen que tener individualmente con cada familia y pues todo ese proceso.
But local residents say that while they aren't necessarily against this change, these conversations aren't happening.
Árboles verdes que se ve por aquí, toda esta área, todo se perdería. Así que pues eso hay que verlo, pues entonces ellos no consultan con uno en realidad, nada más pasan por ahí y hacen lo que tienen que hacer y más nada. Encima pues acabamos de escuchar al gobierno pues en Francia ayer diciendo que ya todo está arreglado y que van a hacer el lago y todavía no han conversado con nosotros, todavía la comunidad de Río Indio no le ha dicho un sí a ellos.
There's also debate about the environmental impact. Canal administrators say the reservoir will provide much-needed drinking water to Panama's thirsty and growing population. But environmentalists foresee damage to endemic species and more bad ecological outcomes than good. The project isn't inevitable. It still needs to pass a public consultation, discussion in the cabinet, and an okay from the National Assembly. But local activists say if it does, one of the biggest changes it would bring would be the disappearance of a rural way of life.
Usted puede presentarle todo bonito, todo moderno, todo bien arregladito, pero no es lo mismo al campesino que está acostumbrado a vivir en su techito de penca, su tranquilidad de ir al monte, quedarse tranquilo en la casa el día que quiere, el día que...
No matter the final decision, Panama may find it has to sacrifice something as climate pressures mount. The smooth running of a global trade artery that helps sustain the nation, or the natural diversity and rural rhythms that risk disappearing under the floodwaters. Patrick Chen and John Van Trieste for TaiwanPlus.
Thank you for watching What's Up Taiwan. You can visit the TaiwanPlus website or follow our social media for more stories from Taiwan and around the world. Finally, check out this Disney-themed Christmas parade in Chile's capital, Santiago. I'm Reece. Take care and see you next time.